Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, this is Jesse with the Common Nerd, bringing you pop culture and all things ready through a common sense lens. And man, I'll tell you what, it is not looking good for Fantastic Four First Steps. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Marvel's introduction of Marvel's first family out there is not doing very well at the box office. Its second weekend predicted drop is spelling absolute disastrous dumpster fire for situation for the movie out there. And obviously, this is something that Kevin Feige and Bob Iger are going to be extremely unhappy about. They were really hoping this movie was going to have legs. And honestly, it's one of them situations where there was a lot of positive word of mouth going around about this movie. The reviews are actually pretty decent out there, but it is just not having the hold and is not having the legs that the likes of Bob Iger and Kevin Feige would have surely had hoped for out there, ladies and gentlemen, and it is just not doing very well at all. Obviously, it faces some very steep competition from Superman out there, which has had one of the most incredible holds we've seen for a comic book movie out there for a very long time. But at the end of the day, Fantastic Four, despite all of its stunning visuals, despite all of the praise and the compliments and all of the cover that the lamestream media out there is trying to run for this movie, well, ladies and gentlemen, based on these predictions alone, things are not going to be looking very good at all. And considering how under estimates, or in some cases overestimates, in the favor of Fantastic Four, that these studios, that these legacy institutions, that these quote-unquote mainstream media organizations have said have been wrong every single time. Their opening weekend projections came in under what they are, came in over what the actual numbers ended up being. It came in lower than expectations and the predictions that the Hollywood trade magazines were putting out there. Why wouldn't we expect the exact same thing to happen? Why wouldn't we expect even a lower second weekend box office than what they are predicting? Why wouldn't we expect an even bigger drop in the second weekend? They are predicting a 60% drop, but boys and girls, there's a million signs out there pointing to this being far worse than that out there. And with Superman having such a great hold, such wonderful word of mouth, and obviously hitting it with all of the key demographics you need to in the United States to have a very successful domestic run, well, it's a direct opposite for Fantastic Four, boys and girls. Despite all of the massive amount of marketing around this movie out there, fans are showing up and they're just not interested in going back in time again, and the word of mouth getting around is just not driving anybody to the studio, anybody to the theaters out there for this movie, and the box office numbers simply show that that is an absolute truth, despite whether or not you love this movie and want it to succeed or not. So we're going to check out this article from thatparkplace.com, getting all of the juicy details of exactly how bad this is looking for Fantastic Four's second weekend drop. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we are grinding, we are growing. We just crossed 2,100. We're sailing our way towards 22, and I think we're sitting around like 2,107 or something like that, and I could not do that without every single one of you. Also, leave us a comment in the section down below. Have you gone and seen Fantastic Four? What did you think of the movie? Do you think it's worth going out there and going and seeing a second time? Is this something you have encouraged your friends to go to see? Is this something you actually went out there and saw and you simply did not like it in any way, shape, or form? Or did you see a lot of the marketing around this movie, realize it was going to be more of the same MCU garbage out there, and decided to completely and totally avoid it right from the get-go? Or are you part of one of the many fans out there who have got Marvel burn out something fierce and simply don't trust the company to do anything good at all in the future? Let us know what you think about all that in the comment section down below. If you'd like to support the channel, please check the links in the description as well. All right, from our dear sweet Marvin Montanaro and thatparkplace.com. Fantastic Four projected to see big box office drop in second weekend. Far worse than Superman. And boys and girls, that's the thing that really at the end of the day was going to matter the most to Hollywood, right? Is there an argument to be made that both of these movies could lose money at the box office? Absolutely, depending on what the budgets actually were versus what it's reported and all of that kind of stuff. There's an argument to be made that both of these movies will end up losing money at the box office, all right? I'm not going to deny that in any way, shape, or form. But knowing that, knowing how Hollywood is with their narcissism, with their ego, with all of their pride, I guarantee you, Kevin Feige, Bob Iger, and everybody else over there at Disney Marvel are absolutely seething to the fact that they are losing to one of their former employees' new studio out there and his very first movie to hit the theaters under the new DC brand. Trust me, despite all of the nonsense you hear in their public-facing images, Disney Marvel is seething over this, boys and girls. And as a DC fanboy, what more could I possibly ask for? Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four First Steps is showing signs of stumbling early after a front-loaded debut that exposed the weakness of the modern Marvel brand. According to recent reports from Deadline, the film is projected to experience a significant 60% drop in its second weekend at the domestic box office, potentially earning around $47 million and signaling weaker audience retention compared to its DC rival Superman. Now, let's talk about that 60% drop here for just a second, okay? On average, most movies get a 60 to 70% drop from their first weekend to their second weekend. If you get somewhere in the 50% mark, that means you've got a really good hold, okay? That's what Superman hit. That's what things like Deadpool and Wolverine hit, right? Avengers Endgame probably came somewhere in the 40% range for weekend to weekend drop, if not even lower, right? Those are all really good signs. But a 60 to 70% weekend drop is about average. Now, they're calling it on the low side of average of 60%. But like we stated earlier, their estimates have been highly in favor of this movie the entire time, and every single time have actually fallen against their predictions and towards the negative side for Fantastic Four. It underperformed their predictions, and I'd imagine their drop is actually going to be worse than the predictions. Because like I said, 60 to 70% is average. And because Marvel's burnout is real, I'd imagine this thing is going to come in on the high side of those averages, much closer to 70%. But who am I? I'm just some common nerd on the internet who's watching this stuff and paying attention to it. I could be completely and totally wrong. After all, they are the experts. And as the government told us during the 2020s, we have to trust the experts. Right, boys and girls? Right? Trust the experts. Trust the experts. This comes on the heels of the first weekend that ultimately fell short of expectations and fell short in comparison to Superman's debut, highlighting ongoing challenges for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, as it builds towards Avengers Doomsday. And why shouldn't it? Everything that they put out over the last few years, with the exception of a couple of rare gems, has been absolute garbage. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and literally Deadpool and Wolverine. Outside of that, there's an argument to be made. Everything else has lost money, and all of the fan reactions have almost universally said it really wasn't all that good to absolutely downright sucked and it was an abomination, i.e. the Eternals and the Marvels, right? So yeah, none of the fans trust them anymore. Whereas to the direct opposite, you have a fresh face and a fresh start to the DC universe out there that clearly fans are at least willing to give a shot to. The Fantastic Four First Steps, starring a bunch of people and yada, 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 launched on July 25th with high anticipation. The film grossed $117.6 million domestically over its opening weekend, which honestly, they were the early numbers for that one, like a month ago, were 140 to 150, right? That quickly got dropped to 120 to 130. And then as Saturday drop came in, they dropped those predictions down to 120. Even with the Sunday reports came in, they stood by that 120 so much to where the numbers had it reported Monday morning. And then guess what happened? Even their last minute predictions, seeing the numbers roll in real time, they still came in under. Why wouldn't the second weekend drop be worse than what they're predicting? So although though it did mark a record, marking a record for the franchise, its stars and the director, which it's literally a brand new. Anyway, globally it debuted to 216 million, a respectable figure, but that failed to meet Superman's 220 million bow earlier in the month, which Superman had an incredibly weak international box office. So yeah. Breaking down the domestic numbers reveals a tale of front-loading, a common issue for films that rely heavily on fan hype and previews but struggle to maintain momentum. Like I said to a lot of people out there, the Fantastic Four do not have the name recognition that a lot of hardcore comic book and hardcore nerd and geeks thought that it did. This ain't Deadpool and Wolverine. The film earned $57.2 million on Friday, but saw a sharp 42% drop to $33 million on Saturday, followed by a decline to $27 million on Sunday. The Saturday dip was notably steeper than Superman's 33%, decline, indicating that Fantastic Four appealed more to diehard fans rushing to see it earlier rather than broader audiences with sustained interest. In contrast, Superman, which opened to $125 million domestically, demonstrated stronger word of mouth and family appeal. Deadline noted that fewer families attended Fantastic Four. You know, that movie that was marketed as a family movie that had Sue Storm as the lead and a female Silver Surfer. Yeah, that family movie, that Marvel family movie, flopped with families. With kids under 13 making up only 8% of the audience, compared to the typical 21% for PG-13 superhero films. They literally lost over half of the typical audience, family audience, that shows up to a PG-13 movie. Boy, you think Marvel burnout is real? You think maybe they damaged their brands with families? Rural and suburban markets also underperformed by 13%. You know, you remember those flyover states? Yeah, those the common sense folks out there? Yeah, the people that don't live in the giant city bubbles? Yeah. Further hampering its domestic haul, Fantastic Four's global and domestic shortfalls underscores Marvel's ongoing struggle to recapture the universal appeal that had defined its earlier phases. And let's look at that real quick, because I was looking this up, and I didn't realize this. I did not realize how much money Avengers Endgame actually made. This movie made almost $3 billion globally, $2.7 billion. Even if this movie cost them $500 to $600 million to produce, which some rumors say that actually is what it cost, this movie still made a massive profit. Avengers Endgame, the profits from Avengers Infinity War and Endgame literally have been coasting, have been the only thing fueling and funneling money and making any of this available to be able to be made for all of Phase 4 and Phase 5. The entire MCU was funded by the last two Avengers movies. They have literally been coasting on the goodwill and the profits of these two movies for years, boys and girls. That's why everything is collapsing and failing miserably now. The front loading extended into the weekdays, with Fantastic Four experiencing a major box office drop heading into its first Monday. After Sunday's $27 million, the firm earned just $10 million on Monday, representing a roughly 61% drop from its previous day. This is a steeper decline than Superman faced in its first Monday, where it pulled in $12.9 million, a 58% drop. And honestly, Superman had a great hold during the weekend. I think it had one of the best Tuesdays for a comic book movie that anybody had seen in a long time. Like, it was nuts how good the Superman hold was. By Tuesday, Fantastic Four rebounded slightly to $14.2 million, pulling its domestic to $142. However, this recovery does little to mask the initial weekday weakness. Industry analysis point to factors like mixed reviews, praising the visual effects and script, but criticizing pacing, and competition from holdovers like Superman, which continued to draw crowds with positive buzz. I mean, Superman has literally eaten in to this movie's market. Like, it's just not even close. It's really, really funny to see. Superman's first week ended with $177.7 million domestically, setting a higher bar for sustained performance. Now, here's where things get interesting. Looking ahead, the projections for Fantastic Four's second weekend drop are concerning. Deadline reports are expected to be a 60% decline domestically, translating to approximately $47 million, enough to hold the number one spot, but far cry from stability shown by Superman. Other estimates from Variety, an outlet known for being very kind to Disney, suggest a range of $45 million to $52 million, implying a 55 to 60% drop. This would still be worse than Superman's second weekend hold of 53%, where it earned $58.5 million domestically and pushed its 10-day total to $236.2 million. These numbers are going to be off. It's going to lose more than this. It's going to have a bigger drop-off than what they're predicting, because it has the entire time been worse than they have predicted every single time for Fantastic Four. We are likely to see a 65 to 70% drop, which if that is the case, if even their 60% drop is accurate, this movie has no path going forward to making a profit and very well could end up below the $500 million mark and absolutely will get beat by Superman globally at the box office. And that is egg on Kevin Feige's face, and that will have James Gunn tickling himself and giggling all the way to the bank, and I don't blame him. Superman's stronger legs are evident by the daily holds. In comparison, Fantastic Four's projected drop aligns more closely to underperformance in the MCU like Captain America, Brave New World, and Thunderbolts, both of which lost money. If these numbers hold, the film's domestic total could fizzle out around $300 to $400 million, far below the blockbuster thresholds Marvel once routinely achieved. And like I said, could end up being way worse than that if this second weekend drop comes in significantly higher than what they expected, because that means next weekend will be even worse. It's diminishing returns every single weekend. And the worse this gets, the worse it will continue to get. This performance raises red flags for Marvel Studios as it navigates post-Endgame era marked by inconsistent hits. The Fantastic Four, literally, it's only had 2 actual, legitimate, arguable hits since then. Undeniably Deadpool and Wolverine and Guardians of the Galaxy. Retro-futuristic vibes, yada, yada, yada. We don't care. The Marvels, the Ant-Man, Wasp, Quantumania, all flopped, all dropped. Yes, Captain America, Brave New World, a.k.a. Captain Black America. You know, the Captain America without Steve Rogers, a.k.a. actual Captain America, flopped. The Marvels flopped. Thunderbolts flopped. We can go all day and long over this one. Despite these challenges, Fantastic Four has broken some positive trends, ending a 6-year MCU streak of sub $100 million opening weekends. Obviously, with the exceptions of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and of course, Deadpool and Wolverine, both of which was a James Gunn production, and the other one was a Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman production, not a Kevin Feige Disney Marvel production. So yeah, they don't exactly count. If the second weekend confirms a projected plunge, Marvel may need to reassess its strategy to ensure Avengers Doomsday doesn't face a similar fate. Here's a thought. Don't have all your marketing center around the women. Don't have your directors and your writers and your reporters and everybody else go out there and say that, I don't know, Sue's the bestest ever, that she saves the guys a whole bunch. And I don't know, here's a thought. Don't introduce a Silver Surfer that no actual fans know anything about other than the Wikipedia warriors, where even the actress herself said, hey, isn't Silver Surfer a dude? You can factor a million different aspects of this as to why this movie's going to fail and lose money at the box office. Marvel burnout is real. It really is. And you could argue that go woke, go broke is a major factor, and it is. Right? It is. Because why? What happens? What happens when you go woke, go broke, right? It's not just that you go woke and go broke. Why do you go broke is the question, right? Why can you go woke and always end up going broke, right? Well, it's very simple. You can tell a movie, you can tell a story, you can tell a good story, you can tell a fantastic story, as it were, and push an agenda. You have to be subtle about it. You also have to make sure that your story is prioritized over your agenda, right? Fern Gully is always the example I bring up. That is very obviously a movie with an agenda. Don't cut down all the rainforest because bad things are going to happen. I don't think that's really too much of something that we all can, at least to some degree, agree to. Right? At the end of the day, morally, I think we all get that cutting down all of the trees would be a very bad idea. Right? But a lot of people, especially back in the 90s, would have called that, the conservatives back then, the Republicans back then, whatever you want to call them back then, would have argued that that was an eco-friendly, pushing a green agenda, a bunch of liberal, commie, yada, yada nonsense. Right? Much like what we scream about today. The difference was the general audiences still showed up to Fern Gully. Why? Because it was a good story. The animation was wonderful. The story made sense. It played out well. The characters were wonderful and engaging. Well, here's the difference between having an agenda-driven story and having a woke story. A woke story causes you to prioritize your agenda above everything else, right? You come from a premise to where we have to have a girl boss in it. We have to have the female race, gender swapped Silver Surfer, right? We have to have Reed being the stupid nincompoop instead of being the strong leader, right? We have to have all of these things before we start off with a good story, right? And that's the problem. When you do a paint by numbers, you lose the quality storytelling that made Fern Gully so good, right? You lose that because you have to have a good story in order to be a vehicle to push your agenda and make it palatable to a general audience. Marvel has had no idea how to do that, essentially since Endgame. Because there's arguments to be made with all the girl boss scenes in there that some of that agenda stuff was starting to get forced into there, right? But since then, it's been nothing but agenda-driven storytelling from the get-go. We have to tell female-driven stories. We have to tell gay stories. We have to tell LGBTQ alphabet soup nonsense out there that's going to save lives, like with the Eternals. And when you prioritize your agenda and your identity politics over good storytelling, you will go broke. That's the difference between having an ideology and wanting to use a story to help express that ideology and starting from woke identity politics. That's how woke always leads to broke, because they don't make sure that their story is priority. Their agenda is always priority. And that's why they lose. Because for the past 6 years, Marvel, Kevin Feige, and Bob Iger, and honestly Disney as a whole, has prioritized their political agenda over good storytelling. And it has cost them billions of dollars. It has cost them Star Wars as a brand. They have caused Star Wars to be a dead brand. They have lost $30 billion on that franchise. And over the past 6 years, Marvel has chased that same modern audience. They thought they could turn Marvel into a girl and LGBTQ alphabet soup brand. And how has that worked out for them? Disney Star Wars lost them $30 to $35 billion, if not arguably more. Disney Marvel has basically wasted every single profit and more, 25, maybe $30 billion between movies and television shows, to where they have not made a profit overall since Endgame. They have lost hundreds of billions of dollars betting on this modern audience that doesn't exist and never will. That's why go woke equals going broke, because of their priorities. Their priority has never been giving us good Fantastic Four. Their priority has never been good storytelling. Their priority has been teaching you, educating you, changing your way of mind, and indoctrinating you into their cult and their way of thinking. And fortunately enough for all of us out there, God is still on his throne in heaven, and common sense does still prevail. And the majority of the audiences out there have rejected the woke agenda from Disney Marvel. That is why Fantastic Four will flop. That is why Fantastic Four is suffering drastically at the box office, seeing huge drops. And that's why Superman will win the summer comic book box office blockbuster battle, and Fantastic Four will lose. Marvel burnout is real, and Kevin Feige has no one to blame but himself. You danced with the woke devil, and now you've gotten burned. Fantastic Four will flop, and it's exactly what you deserve.